Well, I moved to London in 1976, which was a very hot, dry summer. We found that it wasn't what we were expecting because it was a very big place, but it was very small-minded in many ways. People basically kept very much themselves to themselves.
I used to live in the country until I was 3.5, and I hated London when I first came. I found it very hot and I hated the pavements and there was no greenery and the flowers all seemed to be really boring. So for my first few years I really loathed it. And then I gradually got used to it, and I guess that in the years that I've lived here I've come to appreciate it so much more.
Well, I moved to London about 6 years ago, having lived all over the world, but London is quite sort of distinct in its way of being and how you can be there. And for me, it was a great place to move to. There was lots going on, but it was always very busy and active.
Well, when I was younger, it was very uniform. It was mostly white people in London. And since then it's changed. It's changed enormously. And there are a huge diversity of people and great mixture. It's great. I mean, I like that fact.
I think for someone who's growing old in London, there are still lots of things available. Because it's a big urban centre, there are lots of activities going on that are geared towards supporting older people. But equally, as you begin to grow old, your friendship groups, your family groups start to become smaller because of retirements, because often people are sadly bereaved, etc. So the circle of people around you becomes smaller and people begin to lose confidence. And in a big city, that can be quite intimidating. So there are lots of opportunities to do things, but as increasingly it becomes more difficult for you to access them, it's more complicated.
A lot of people obviously have become widowed or widowers. And it is very hard. It's, as Gwen said, it knocks your confidence.
It is lonely life when you're on your own. And if you haven't got good neighbours or good friends around, sort of thing, because some people are not very easy at making friends, and that, then it can be very lonely.
Well, there's more money around, no question about that, but there's less in terms of sort of way of community cohesion. People sort of separate themselves much more than they did. I mean, some of the old models of getting people together, like things like sort of drop-ins and social clubs and things like that, most of those have gone.
Well, I feel as though I belong to an increasingly large fraction of the population which is getting older. And I feel also that maybe there's resentment of older people amongst younger people. They resent some of the things that they're being asked to do for us as we get older, and I hope that that doesn't happen. But I don't feel it myself yet. I feel that I'm not treated as an old person, and that things are okay for me, and I don't feel old. But if I start to feel vulnerable, if I can't walk very fast, then I will feel frightened because people move so fast and they might knock me over and all that sort of thing. So I see other people having problems, and when I broke my leg, I did feel vulnerable. In fact, particularly when I didn't have a stick, I felt very vulnerable because people would get up for me when they saw that I had crutches. But if you're old and frail and you don't have a stick and you don't look so frail, they may ignore you. I think that it's hard to prescribe all these things. There has to be some kindness and some feeling between people. But I think that things like our local public library, for example, are incredibly important because people can meet there, and they can meet there for free. And there's quite a lot of older persons groups there, I think, of different kinds. And also some of the training that the library offered in use of computers. My partner did that several years ago, and that was very good. So I think providing opportunities for people, especially opportunities where they might possibly meet with other people and younger people. So the government has to be very careful about how it closes down free services.
I think that the government realises, or is beginning to realise, that we are facing a situation where our population is changing quite dramatically, and there needs to be a more joined up approach to services for older people, particularly in later older age, when people become more fragile and vulnerable and more likely to be living by themselves. Housing is also quite key to this as well, so good quality housing that supports people in older age is crucial.
They're growing old as such, like they say a lot about loneliness and about family and all this. For myself, not having any family here, I'm not subjected to this idea of loneliness. I would say again that safety in the home and safety and the security of a home, that was the one thing I would say. The security of whatever tenure, whatever accommodation they have, I think when older people have that, I think it's a great comfort. I think it's of all the comforts, I think that would be.
Society and individuals, people should notice more who's around them, perhaps, than they do. I mean, some people do. The only way you're going to find out about a person who's shy about going out, for example, is if you realise that they're there. And if we could get people to offer help gratis, that would be useful, but then you have to build trust. So it's quite a long-term thing to do that.
It's just not celebrated enough, the fact that people live 10, 15 years longer than, my parents and grandparents did.
In the Transition Town movement, there's one really interesting idea, which is that older people should be able to share their gardens with younger people who can help them with the work. So there's an exchange of information and experience with strength. And the fact is that it's quite difficult because you have to develop trust between people. But I think it might be possible over the longer term if people really, if the younger people were known to the group and therefore could be in some way, trust could be built.
We find that young people are really, really interested in sort of, older people's experiences. And we do a lot of work with the library and educational organisations as well to try and get that co-engagement between young people and older people. So we're not asking for more money. What we are saying is to local authority, to health services, to statutory and commercial agencies as well, because there's a lot of employers out there, commercial organisations, which do have a social conscience. Let's make the best of what's available out there.
We are all responsible for the older people in our communities as we are for everybody else around us, and it's really as much about saying that, if you haven't seen your neighbour for a few days, they live on their own. They might be just knocking the door and saying, hello, how are you? Do you fancy a cuppa?
I have no fear of growing old. Growing old. Equally, hope is a limited thing at my age. I'm 86, so therefore I may have 10 years, I may have 10 minutes, I don't know. So my hope is just a contented life and have no aggravation, I feel a good sense of protection.
Well, I hope that one day I will be growing old in London, and so for me I'd really love it to be something where I could be very much in touch with people, not just of my own age but different ages as well, to be able to access the services that I needed to run to my everyday life and just to have a good social life where I'm happy and content.
I would like to grow old like one of the trees I saw yesterday in Epping Forest. They're very old, they've been pollarded many times, they've provided loads of firewood and wood for making furniture. They are really strong and they have provided a lot of help to people over hundreds of years, and they're going to continue, and parts of them might be rotten but parts of them are growing, and they're absolutely wonderful trees and they'll live long after me. I'd like to be like that.